Right, as I said, there are growing calls for state governments to wipe rental debts clean. Comes, of course, after the pandemic made it increasingly difficult for tenants to pay up and there were moratoriums. Now, until now, recently, many who experienced financial difficulty were under and protected by the moratorium. But an advocacy group called Better Renting, they fear that people will lose their homes when these debts get called in March. In fact, they actually want the government to step in, pay out the landlords, take on the debt and then let the debts go. So the taxpayer basically brings on these debts. Now, this proposal goes ahead. It's millions and millions and millions of taxpayer dollars. I don't think it's something they can necessarily afford, taxpayers, government, all of us at this time. To discuss it, I'm joined by News Corp's national financial writer, Sophie Elsworth in Melbourne. I can see the argument, Sophie, but taxpayers have also been giving people JobKeeper and JobSeeker. There's a lot of people out there who, even in these difficult times, did their best to pay a good proportion of their rent, if not their rent. So why are we rewarding as taxpayers those who didn't pay their rent? What sort of signal does that send?
Well, that's right, Peter. I mean, what you've said there is exactly on the money. I mean, really, we're shifting the cost here onto the taxpayer. And I think it sets a very dangerous precedent when there are situations like this, that it gets to the point where the tenant doesn't have to actually pay the rent. I think they need to work out an agreement with their landlord. Now, the state government here in Victoria had a $3,000 cash grant that was given to them to be given directly to the landlord to help them through this period. So I think we can't just keep burdening taxpayers with all these expenses. And like I say, it sets a very bad precedent that if this happens again, and who knows if a pandemic will happen again, that we simply just shift these costs. And I don't think that's the answer at all.
I want to move on to another issue. New research has revealed almost 500,000 Australian households have actually been spared the risk of losing their homes because, as we've talked about, JobSeeker, JobKeeper and other coronavirus supplement payments. You're going to give us a bit of a sneak peek tonight of an exclusive you've got tomorrow in the papers in relation to postcodes with the highest JobKeeper application rates.
That's right, Peter. I've got Australian Taxation Office figures which showed the worst hit suburbs in Australia in August. Now, interestingly, it showed across the whole of the country, the top 20 suburbs that had the highest applicants for JobKeeper in August were all from Victoria. Now, this was obviously the beginning of the second lockdown. We all know why we were in that second lockdown through the hotel quarantine failures. And it showed that in areas such as Dandenong, Frankston and Cranbourne, they were where the real spikes were, with small businesses particularly signing up to JobKeeper to get them through the second lockdown. So your hairdressers, your milk bars, you know, those smaller operators, personal services that were fully shut down. So it shows these outer suburbs of Melbourne were very hard hit, and they were the ones seeking urgent help.
Where do you think things will be in March? We know there's been quite substantial jobs created outside of Victoria. Victoria had continuing job losses in the latest round of data out. But, you know, is confidence returning? Is there some sense that Victoria will rebound over the Christmas period or not?
Well, look, Peter, I don't think it's as simple as that. I mean, some people out there who have been fans of Daniel Andrews, they think that he's done a remarkable job in getting us through the second wave that the state government caused themselves, think that these jobs will just bounce back. Now, a lot of them are on this financial life support, and as we know, this ends in March. So the truth will be told if those businesses can continue to function. And many of them have had to significantly change the way they operate during the pandemic and post-pandemic. You know, a lot of people aren't going into shops now. People aren't booking things like they were. Events aren't around. So I think the coming months in Victoria particularly will be extremely concerning to see if we can bounce back in 2021.
Yeah, I tell you what, I think it'll be tough. I think it'll be tough, particularly for small business, and particularly for CBDs, Sophie. We know the PM has said today that he wants all public servants sort of back in the office, back at their desks. When Daniel Andrews eased restrictions in Victoria just recently, he told public servants to stay home, not to come to work, and brought back only 25% of the private sector. Everyone says to me, you know, getting public servants and big business back to work is absolutely critical to opening up our CBDs again. That's a challenge.
Oh, absolutely, Peter. And I mean, really, these public servants have gone unscathed during this whole pandemic. A lot of them have got pay rises. They've suffered no financial hit at all, whereas the private sector's just been absolutely smashed. So there's a really, two-speed economy happening here. And I think the public sector workers should be put back to work. They can't just continue to work from the comfort of their couch in their tracksuit pants while the private sector's back at work, struggling to make ends meet and, you know, hoping that their businesses will survive. It can't go on like this. The public service down here in Victoria has been completely untouched, and it's really showing through the way Daniel Andrews treats public sector workers. They are favoured by the government down here.
I think you're right. Sophie. Sophie Elsworth, thank you.
Thanks, Peter.